Hi everybody, Jason here from Murideo, and on today's show we're going to have Gregg Loewen returning from the PVA. How you doing, Greg?
Hey, good, Jason. How are you?
I'm fantastic, man. A beautiful day in Florida. I hope everything's well with you up there.
We're having good weather, expecting some more snow this weekend.
I heard. Well, it's cool, man. Well, thank you for everybody for joining today's webinar. We're going to be doing some really cool stuff here. Greg has behind him a really nice JVC RS2000 projector. And we wanted to walk through some calibration stuff with you guys with that specific projector. You may remember we did do something like this in the past, but it was with a projector that was a couple of years older. And we had some requests from you guys to do a current model. So here we are. So Greg, you've got the JVC RS2000 behind you. And let's kind of walk everybody through just the equipment that you're using and what we're going to be using today for this calibration.
Calibration, well, it's part of my theater. I jump back between different projectors. So I have a Panasonic 820 UHD player.
Excellent.
And I have Roku and Apple TV and all that kind of stuff too.
Sure.
DirecTV and Dish Network. So that's my basic AV stuff. For the calibration, we're using a Murideo 6G unit as a reference signal generator onto the screen. And then for meters, we're using a Jetty 1511 spectroradiometer as reference, and then we're using a Klein K10 to do all the readings.
Excellent.
That's probably 30 times faster than the Jetty, and it'll get us done in a couple hours versus 5 or 7 hours.
Sure. No, that's great, guys. And as we're going through the presentation today, just keep in mind there is this is open. This is really for you guys to see how this all goes down and for you to ask some questions. So we really encourage you guys to ask questions as we go along here. There is a question box. I'll have that open on my other screen here. So if you guys have questions, don't be shy. Type those questions in and we'll answer those as we go along. What you're looking at on the screen right now, you should see me, you should see Greg, and then you should see another camera that's pointed right at Greg's screen here. So you should see the JVC menu, and it looks like there's a test image up on the screen now. And at some point here, when we get rolling on things, we're going to show Greg's screen as well. And you guys will be able to make that screen larger to see it and things like that. We will be recording this session, guys, so if you can't stay for more than an hour or so, that's totally fine and understandable. We don't want you guys to be late for anything or miss any other engagements, so we will record it and we'll get this posted up on YouTube for all to see later. There's a question that came in already. We'll be calibrating HDR or SDR. Yes, we'll be doing both here. So I think we'll probably be about 2 hours or so. So like I said, guys, if that's too much time for you, no worries, because we're going to record this and you'll be able to rewatch it at any time, so it'll be up on YouTube. So with that being said, Greg, let's go ahead and get rolling. Let's get into it. We're going to make a profile first, right? And then we'll jump into the actual calibration.
Yeah, just another couple little things. So we're going to have a link to the video on Facebook and the AV Pro site, and also on Facebook we'll have a discussion area. So if you actually have questions afterwards, or you're not watching this live, you can go to the Professional Video Alliance Facebook page and ask questions there, and we'll answer them for you.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, thanks for that, Greg. Thanks for setting that up. That's cool.
Okay, let's get in. So I'm gonna show my screen and see what we got here.
Now, as you guys are seeing, Greg's got his laptop screen nice and big up here for all to see. There is kind of a little bar in between. You might see it in between the 3 different cameras and and Greg's screen. You can actually use your mouse to grab that bar, and you can move it to make his screen a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller or whatnot. So if you guys are having a hard time seeing his screen, go ahead and take that bar and make the screen as big as you'd like. And yeah, great.
So you can see me and you can see the full screen right now?
Yep. We've got me, you, your other camera facing the screen, and we have your laptop right now that we can see.
Okay, good. All right, so I'm just going to start on CalMan, which right now is sorry?
I was just going to say to everybody, what we did not show in the last video, just to save a little bit of time, Greg had made his profile for the Klein before the session. But we're going to do this from scratch with you guys, so you'll actually be able to see the profiling, the calibration, and see everything from start to finish.
Okay, so we're starting off the software. So CalMan is my preferred calibration software. It's really versatile. It's very powerful, and I'm using the ultimate version, which is a little more expensive, but it interfaces with a lot of post-production monitors and supports a lot of auto calibration features with some of those monitors also.
Greg, there's a question already from David. He says, I assume you did a JVC auto cal first, or is this bone stock?
I have not done anything to this projector.
So it's bone stock.
Welcome
okay, cool.
to square one, guys.
Yeah, good.
Okay, I'm just trying to make my screen here so you can see it. And
sure.
Okay. I think we're good. No, so yeah, so we're going to see how this works. I have not. This is a projector that's a demo projector that's been sent by JVC for this purpose, and we just need to get things up and running here. So first thing I like to do, I want to get my meters up and running. If I'm not quite sure of the situation, I'll go into my device manager, and I'll see what's connected to what. So I know when I get my software, my meters up and running, I can select the correct COM ports and everything else. So I have some Bluetooth stuff, and I have COM 4 and 5, not sure which is which. One will be my client, one will be my Murideo.
So guys, what Greg's doing right here, if you're not familiar with CalMan, he's got the generator connected to the laptop via USB, and now he's just making a kind of a software connection so that the generator and CalMan can talk to each other. It looks like your client already connected, which I do see that is an option in CalMan. You can have things reconnect.
Right. The good thing of it is, yes, it reconnects, but it'll reconnect only if that's what was connected the last time.
Yep, there you go. You got it. You got it.
So with me doing whatever I'm doing with it, whatever meters I'm using, I own 4 Spectre radiometers and everything else. Mm-hmm. I'm not always having the same tools. So especially on a first time setup, I always say go in, device manager, see what the COM ports are. Right. And then it's much easier to configure things.
Excellent.
So I got my radio set up. I'm going to use Windows 10%. That's just a standard size and good for that. Now I'm going to jump into my meters. So my meter is my client, Kate, and a projector facing the screen. And then I want to use meter profiling. So in meter profiling, you have a reference meter and a target meter. So a reference meter is a spectral radiometer. Usually, and then the target meter is usually a tri-stimulus device. Tri-stimulus devices are typically faster and more sensitive at lower light levels, where spectroradiometers are more accurate but much slower and usually less accurate at low light levels. So we do this profiling mechanism where we take the measurements from the spectroradiometer and we apply them to the tri-stimulus meter. So we'll have all the benefits of the accuracy, but all the benefits of the speed and the low light sensitivity on the tri-stimulus device.
Excellent. Greg, real quick, another question came in. If you recall taking a look, do you know how many hours are on the projector on that lamp?
No, we can find out.
Yeah, we can find out real quick while you're connecting your meter. And what he's got going on right here, guys, the Klein K10 is connected via USB, which is why you have to assign a COM port. The Jetty, on the other hand, is, Greg, unless you have it set up differently, I always set mine up with Bluetooth, which I think is a lot more convenient. I can put it wherever I want. I don't have to worry about long cables and tripping and things like that. So I typically use Bluetooth on the Jetty.
Yeah, and I use Bluetooth on Jetty too, except in my situation right now, I have so many Bluetooth devices on my connected to my laptop. Yeah. I do not know which one of the 10 or so Bluetooth devices it is, so I'm kind of guessing. So sure. That was not it. So we're going to go back to, so I'm still having to try to find my reference meter. So we did, let's try.
4 and 5, I think they were.
No, 4 and 5 are the Bluetooth COM ports are separate from those.
Gotcha.
4 and 5 would be the Murideo and the Klein.
Mm-hmm.
The Jetty's something else. So I have to kind of click through them and.
Did you go in that menu and see the hours? I didn't see if you caught that or not.
I think it was 250.
250, so it's still pretty new. It's still a baby. John asks if you still have your PR670.
I do. I have so my spectral radiometers that I carry with me, I carry a PR670 that's at 5 nanometers of resolution with Bluetooth. I have my Jetty 1511, which I'm using now, that's especially a new unit they're selling that's at 2 nanometers, and then I also have a Bluetooth 1211 that's at 4.5.
Guys, you'll see this too because I opted to the same thing on my Jetty. you'll see that it says high resolution. And that's how you know which ones are down to 2 nanometers. They have that high resolution sticker. I opted that specifically, Greg, and you might have a similar opinion here, but I went for that upgrade because I was starting to do more Sony and JVC laser phosphor projectors, and you need that real narrow bandwidth for those. That was the main reason I got it.
I'm not really seeing a measurement difference in them.
Yeah.
I'm talking to Dr. Gorich at Stefan, the lead scientist at Jetty. He hasn't measured anything where it's made a difference yet.
Okay,
but,
cool.
I mean, they're still saying hypothetically, when we're getting towards non-CRT or newer light source devices that are going to create larger color gamuts, we have the potential for narrower bandwidths on the RGB spectral spikes, which might be lost on the larger resolutions.
Sure.
So I mean that's what we've been hearing now for a dozen years.
Right. It was a good upgrade for me. I was using an i1 Pro 2 from X-Rite for many years, and it worked great. But it's a 10 nanometer spectroradiometer, so it was time for me to upgrade anyway, and I took the dive, and I'm really enjoying that. One thing, maybe, Greg, if you can, after you're done with the profile, if you could maybe make your Calman maximize that screen, maybe.
Okay, so you're not seeing the little box in the corner then from
I'm only
webinar box.
No,
okay.
I'm only seeing like a kind of half of a blank desktop. That's all. But yeah.
Okay, I'll do that in half a second. But I have to finish my profile first, so we'll do that. So anyway, so I have my reference meter set up as a Jetty, my Klein meter. I'm going to add a profile, and then I can call it whatever I want to call it. This is just untitled 14. And then I can do single pass or multi-pass. Single pass is going to measure white, red, blue, and green from each device separately. So it'll do white, red, blue, and green from the Jetty. Then that's what multi-pass does. And then it'll do white, red, blue, and green from the Klein. Single pass will do both at the same time. So I'm just going to do single pass. And it says prepare your meters. Boom.
And then right now, Greg, and I know it'd be kind of hard to show everybody, but can you kind of describe how the meters are set up physically, and are they close to each other? Are they next to each other? Are they far apart from each other? How do you have it set up?
I have them about 8 feet from the screen on tripods right beside each other.
Cool, great. And guys, what's great about these meters in particular, they have a laser pointer. So if you are 6 or 8 feet away from the screen, you can just fire up the laser and see exactly where you're aiming, which is kind of nice.
So yeah, I'm having my first problem of the night is it gave me a quick error. I am finding a sync problem when I do this. And I'll show you what I mean here is because I did not start with a pattern on the screen.
Yep, I've run into that myself.
So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to do it over meter profile, Jetty, Klein, reset profile, and then I want to put a pattern on the screen first. Okay, so now I have my pattern. I have pattern on the screen. It doesn't have to sync. So now when I do the measurements, it'll just do the measurements and it won't go to a blank screen. So bear with me again for half a second while I do that one more time. I kind of wanted to do this just from start to finish so I could tell someone afterwards, well, hey, if you want to learn how to profile, just watch the video. Segment of the video. So we have it all in one place.
Cool, yeah, good idea.
Okay, so we have that 14. We're going to do single pass. We're ready. So there you see. So now it'll go boom, white, red,
now, Greg, just to kind of discuss a little bit about the speed difference here, just as a kind of a experiment, I guess I was bored one night and I was like, well, let me calibrate my computer monitor, just my laptop monitor with just the Jetty, and I swear I was sitting there for like hours, and that was on a LCD based laptop. So trying to do this with just the Jetty or any spectroradiometer for that matter will just murder you on time, which is why we always recommend doing a tri-stim and making a profile.
And it wasn't, I mean, I started off using a Photo Research PR650, then my 670 by themselves. That was in 2005, 2008. But that wasn't so bad when you're just doing a 2-point white balance or a 10-point gamma. But now when we're doing multiple CMS adjustments, multiple gamma adjustments, you just can't do it with a spectroradiometer by itself in a reasonable length of time.
Sure.
So,
Greg, how long do you like to let the projector and the bulb warm up before you really hammer on it? I usually give it about 30 minutes or so. Do you have a different perspective?
yeah, I mean, I've always said 30 minutes.
Yeah,
You know, when I get to a client's house, first thing I do is I turn the display on and I start setting up. By the time I'm setting up, the thing's ready to go. You know, it's never an issue. Okay, so I'm going to make this full screen now so you can see. Is that a little better?
Boom. Yeah, and Greg, if you need to, on your GoToWebinar user interface, there's a little like orange arrow that's pointing to the edge of the screen. If you click that, it'll get rid of that, so you won't have to see it.
Okay, yeah, that's a little more convenient. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so I use the I'm going to use the PVA workflow, but there's lots of different workflows you can have out there. The PVO is specifically for people that have attended the Professional Video Alliance 4-day training program. But if you'd like to have that, go ahead and just send me an email. I'll send you a copy of it. Here's the PVA. So we're just going to start off the workflow. Basically, it steps the workflow. We hook up our meter. We hook up our source. If we had an auto calibration, we'd be using that. We would hook up 0.3. But so we've done all that things. Meter positioning. I'm in their correct position. So my typical, I am calibrating from 16 to 235. That's video levels. So we're an 8-bit, and I want to be calibrating gamma 2.4 in a reference room, and we're going to be. So I'm going to select 2.4 on here, and then 709.
Greg, do you have an opinion on? Because I've seen the graphs before of 1886 laid on top of 2.4, and they're almost identical. Do you have a point of view on why you use 1886 or 2.4?
Well, the specification is actually 1886, but when you actually look at a reference display, which means a reference display that has a good black level, which the JVCs or any OLED product, they're exactly the same, because 1886 is based on black level luminance. That's one of the settings. So if your black level luminance is 0, it is 2.4. It is 2.4. So I just go ahead and just do 2.4. It's easier, it's more simpler, and it's easier to teach students as you're starting off.
Great, excellent.
So then I teach 1886 for ambient light environments and displays that have poor black levels.
Great, excellent, thank you.
Or if you're trying to perceptually match two monitors that are different. Sorry, that's a third caveat in there. Okay, so this is just pre-calibration in here. I'm just going to hit the auto button. It's measuring. It's going to measure measure 5 white points, a whole bunch of preset of colors, and then it's going to measure a 10-point gamma adjustment or measurements. Just kind of tells us where we are out of the box.
Greg, do you recall what picture mode that you were in as the out of the box mode?
I do not. So this is like exactly how I'd be doing customers calibration. And in this scenario, I am measuring the customer's display before I've done any adjustments to it.
Absolutely.
I don't want to say, I want to, put them in cinema mode or, or whatever. I don't want to fiddle, or I don't want to do any adjustments before I do my pre-measurements. So this is as the customer was watching it before I started to adjust it.
And I like that, and I do that myself, because that's like the easiest, most accurate, honest representation of what they were watching versus what they're watching now. And I've heard of calibrators in the past, they say, well, I'll put the TV back in vivid mode or back in APS mode because that's how it came from the factory. And I don't really like that approach personally. That doesn't really tell us anything if the customer was watching it in cinema mode already. So that's a great tip there, and I do the same thing. So we're going to measure the picture mode that we walked into the house, and that's what was already set to. We're going to measure that.
Okay, and I am going to click on, let's see here.
Oh, did you lose your meter?
I don't, after my profiling, it was left on the jetty.
Oh, okay.
So I need to go back to find meter and just go to Compor, and then because I did my profiling, my profile will still be there. I'll be able to go. But I hit the start button and it was just slow. Well, I did my profiling. I'm just going to turn off the software and restart it.
Okay, that's okay. And while we're waiting for that,
this is reality. Sorry.
No, this is it, guys. This happens all the time, in in a real environment. Sometimes something will lock up and you got to restart, or turns out you didn't select the right meter in CalMan. I mean, we've all made these mistakes before, and that's what this is all about. Is just practice, 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 and do it better every time. No big deal. Robert had a comment while we're waiting. He says 2.6 gamma standard for P3 color space projectors. I haven't heard that before, and I don't really know of anything that's as aggressive as 2.6. Greg, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the cinema spec is DCI P3.
For DCI, right?
Gamma 2.6, and white balance at whatever the content wants to be selected at, which is typically D55.
Yeah.
And in the home market, we do D65.
Right. Yeah,
we are never doing, unless you're doing a commercial cinema or you're working in a post house that actually has a digital cinema for that purpose. You're never setting for 2.6 ever.
Yeah, 2.6 would be just super aggressive for home environment.
Yeah.
But yeah, for DCI though, that makes a lot of sense.
All right, let's get the Klein here now, and
I should be able to pick your profiles. 14, right? Yep, 14. There you go.
Okay, so that's all set up now. Now we can go back to the float, the calibration custom PVA.
Speaking of little hiccups, I was doing a session with Tyler from Portrait Displays a few weeks ago, and we were doing some stuff with the Klein, and I'm just as guilty of this as we all are. I couldn't get readings from the Klein. It turns out I had left the lens cap on. It's just it happens. We're human.
Yeah, I've been there, done that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's another little trick too. Sometimes before I will hit a sequence, just like I had the problems when I first did the profiling.
Right.
I will hit a pattern on the screen to make sure the projectors sync, and it doesn't have to redo the handshake. And now I will hit the read series.
I do the exact same thing. I just make it a habit to click that 100 patch that you just clicked, and then let it rip from there. Good tip.
Now, are you hearing the shutter in the background of the computer?
No, I'm not getting any audio from it, but we can see it all. If the shutter is annoying to you, feel free to mute it or something. No.
I mean the CalMan has that little the little sound, the little motor drive sound from an old camera. So you can't hear that though. Okay.
No, we can't hear it, but we can see the screen changing and stuff. So no worries there.
It's coming in my headset. That's all. It's
bothering me. So you can hear it. Yeah. So yeah, if you want to, man, you can just mute it if you want. Yeah. David says, yeah, the Klein is much faster. Yeah, sure is. Which is one of the.
So in my class, when I'm teaching students, we use I use the generic D3s, which is very similar to the the SpectraCal C6s from Portrait Display.
Mm-hmm.
And we use that for about a day and a half, and then I pull out a couple of K10s.
Yeah.
And once you use the K10, you never want to use the other again. It's just so much faster. It's just so much better at low light.
You get spoiled quickly with that one.
Yeah, if it's in your budget, it's kind of a no-brainer. But I understand it's when people are starting off doing this, if they're doing it as a hobby or just doing it for getting their feet wet professionally, it's a big price point. So you got to start off, in small steps. I mean, okay, so this is pre-calibration. We can see all our reference colors are, our average is 4.8 and the worst are 7.7. Skin tones are right around 5, and some of them are up to around almost 8.
Gamma skin tones are important.
Yeah, white balances, not great.
Average, a little yellow.
7.6, average of 5, and the RGB balance at the same time. So we're not great shape. But let's go ahead and get started on here. Set the black level first. Okay, so starting calibration, let's go ahead and hit the menu screen, see what's on here.
Guys, real quick too, just to mention that pre-calibration view that Greg just showed everybody. If that's a mess, don't freak out because you haven't done anything yet. And it's very, very common to see the factory picture modes on projectors and TVs just be a total mess like this. So this is actually pretty common. As much as we're kind of complaining about it, this is normal. But that's why we're here. We're here to fix it.
Okay, so I'm looking at the picture mode. It is in user 1. That's fine. You choose whatever settings here. I always give the analogy is when I'm calibrating, I'm driving to Central Park, New York City. So when you're calibrating to Central Park, New York City, do you want to start off in Los Angeles? Do you want to start off in Denver? Or do you want to start off in New Jersey? So find which settings are not only are going to start you as close to New York City as you can, but also give you the adjustments to drive to New York City. Sometimes you might just end up in the Hudson River and you there's no adjustments to move anywhere. So get as close as you can with the presets and make sure there's controls in the presets to actually get you to your target. Right. So we're going to use the user one, that's fine. Whoop. And then of course it wants to resync when I've chosen that. At lamp power low, manual aperture is fine. And you can relabel those if you wanted to, but I'm not going to relabel it in this calibration. Yeah. And
just so everybody knows, these projectors have 2 lamp settings, low and high. And Greg, I would assume you're just using low because you're in a super, super dark room. You don't need it to be on high because it'll be louder. The projector will be louder, and it'll might just be too bright. It might be painful to watch.
Yeah, I have a screen with I think a gain of 1.3-ish. And from the calibration we did a couple weeks ago, you know, we were at 40-foot Lamberts, I think. So we have lots of light. So but I'm just kind of seeing where we are as a preset, and I'm kind of just seeing where we're starting at. Sure. So color profiles, we're going to choose 709, and we can tweak that. Color temperature D65, we're going to tweak that. Gamma 2.2 is not what we want, but that's okay. That's a starting point. And then these are some processing controls and some motion flow controls. I turn all that off. Looks like someone's already done that. And these controls, graphic mode, I turn on high res. And I've done enough of these projectors. I turn everything off, with the exception of the enhance. I turn on 1. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of edge enhancement and over sharpening of the image. And save that data. Okay, so again, so that's just kind of preset, see where we're going here. So let's go ahead to the next screen in the software. So we're going to set the black level first.
Hey guys, I can't stress enough to you, and Greg probably agrees with me 100% here. This is probably the most important adjustment you're going to make on this projector is the black level. So, you know, really make sure that the lighting is right. You and your customer are sitting in the right position. This is super, super essential.
Yeah, and to actually do a black level adjustment appropriately, your eyes take 8 minutes to adjust. After you've seen a bright screen, it takes 8 minutes for your eyes to adjust to a dark screen. And that's just kind of from a physiological standpoint. So you really take some time to get the black level adjusted. One other thing we can do in this projector is I'm using input level 16 to 255. So the signal stops at 16. There is no below black on the signal, but it actually goes to super white. So white is defined as step 235, but we're going to go all the way up to 255. So we want to make sure that signal doesn't clip. Okay, so my black level set. I'm going to set the white level next. So the white level I set for 3 things. One is make sure there's no clipping in the signal. The second thing is that the signal's not discoloring, which means that the RGBs are not in balance. Then the third thing is peak light output. And this is actually pretty close. The contrast, we started off with brightness at -3. And brightness was at 0. I put it to -3. Contrast is at 8. And that's about right. I'm turning it up right now. I don't know if I know you can't see the screen, people that are viewing this. We're setting you up so you can see the menus. So well, I guess you can see some of the screen there.
You can see some of it, yeah. Just I know these little cameras just don't have a lot of dynamic range to them to catch all that. But and what we're doing here, guys, is when we're looking at brightness and contrast patterns, this is calibration 101, is getting these 2 things correct. So Greg's just looking for specific numbers and specific boxes that are built into that test pattern to be visible so that we know that the white level is correct.
Okay, so I'll pull the contrast up and down to make sure there's no clipping, and I've optimized the dynamic range there. Now I'm selecting 100% signal level or 100% stimulus, and I'm doing some measurements on that. And I'm at 122 candelas and 35-foot Lamberts. So this is a huge amount of light. It's way too bright for a projector. For starters, you're going to get a headache. And the problem with projectors is, as you increase the light output, you also increase the black floor level. So yeah, you can have a nice bright projector, but then you're going to have really bad blacks.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a trade-off. Do you want to have a bright projector? Yes, for an ambient light lit room, but when you have a light controlled room like we're in right now, you don't want to have a lot of light output. You want to have better black levels. And at the same time, when you're thinking about HDR, you want to have, if SDR is as bright as you can get it, then HDR needs to have the headroom for the spectral highlights, which means HDR will actually be darker than SDR. So you always want to be able to go brighter for HDR. And we have lots of headroom on this projector. This is awesome.
And Greg, what size is that screen in there?
We're 140 inches.
So
I think that's 140 inches in 2.4.
Right. So 35 foot Lamberts at 140 inches is a lot of energy.
And we're in, and again, we're in low lamp mode.
Low, yeah, your lamp's in low. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're gonna be able to. When we get into HDR, we'll put it to high lamp and see what we can actually do. But we're awesome here. I'm gonna go ahead and so the numbers I come up with and I preach are a digital cinema projector is 14 to 16 foot Lamberts. That's what movies are color timed for.
Right.
So if you're in a post-production suite and they do have a projector there, they're looking at 14 to 16 foot Lamberts. We're going to set ourselves up to 16 usually. I know we have so much headroom here. I'm going to go a little bit brighter, maybe 20 foot Lamberts. I wouldn't go brighter than 20, knowing that as I increase the peak light output, I'm also increasing the floor.
Right.
So and we have JVCs have such great black levels. I really don't want to kill my black level by doing that.
Yeah. I notice this too with like a lot of display technology that don't have a fixed black, like LCD panels are the same way.
I'm turning down the aperture. Oh, and I'm got 17, 18, 19. Let's go 22 foot Lamberts for now. It's close enough. I mean, this is all to do a real reference calibration. You should probably be doing everything a full 2 times through anyway.
Sure.
So we've got a black level, we've got a white level set. We're at 22 foot Lamberts. We're good. Brightness and sharpness and geometry. There is no sharpness setting once we've done the other settings that I've already taken care of on the edge enhancement and then I've also checked the focus on this projector prior to doing this session.
Great.
I skipped the screen, so now we're just going to go and we're going to do multi-point grayscale and gamma on the same screen. So we have our gamma target of 2.4. Let's go ahead and do our measurements now. Just see where we're at.
Now, what you guys will notice right here is we're aiming for a 2.4, as you can see by the gamma graph on the right side of the screen. But if you guys remember in the menu, Greg, the projector had a label of 2.2. And I always stress how important this is to check because 2.2 doesn't always mean it's really 2.2. So you might end up with a 2.5 or 2.6 setting to actually get a 2.2. So if you see those values in the menu, don't assume that they're correct. You always should measure those no matter what they say. In some cases, they say high, medium, low. So
and that's how I adjust it. I mean, you're right. You're dead on, Jason. So I look at these and I just look at brighter, darker, really dark.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
So I did. You can see on the software that's 2.2. I'm just gonna because I have the meter I have. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to shoot 2.4 now just to see what the difference. Just to show you what the difference is.
Sure.
I'm going to settle on 2.6 probably.
Probably, yeah. Robert asks, is this a custom workflow in CalMan? Yes, Robert. This is the PVA, specific the PVA workflow. If you attend Greg's class, the workflow you supply them with the workflow, right, Greg? If they do your class.
I do. Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Yep. Excellent.
But this is I mean, it's somewhat similar to the ISF workflow. There's lots of workflows. They're all similar screens.
Sure.
The PVA is just specifically step-by-step how I teach it in the class. So it follows with my classroom work quite well.
Cool. Good.
So we can see here, so the black level stays black pretty good for the first couple steps, and then the gamma from 40 on up is at 2.2, but that's 2.4. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to set 2.6 now.
There you go.
So
that's the other thing, Robert, too. I'll go ahead and mention while we're here. If you do have CalMan Ultimate, it does have the ability to do custom workflows. So if you wanted to tinker around with Ultimate and make your own pages with your own buttons and stuff, it takes a little bit of time to do all those. I've dabbled with it a little bit myself, but you can make these pages look and perform however you'd like if you have the Ultimate version.
Okay, so my 2.4 is actually my 2.6 on the projector is actually following 2.4 quite well, except on the dark side. The dark side gets very dark. So the next thing is I want to recheck my black level, because what's happening is I know I'm crushing black, and I fix that.
Yep.
That'll fix some of this substantially.
Another thing you can do too, guys, while Greg's pulling up these test patterns, something I like to do at least when I'm looking at different gamma options in the projector or in the TV, I'll pull up like a 16-step vertical staircase test pattern or 16-step grayscale pattern. And as you toggle between the gamma settings, you'll see the darkest bars will get really dark and start to blend together, or they'll start to get really light. So if the gamma settings on the TV or projector are labeled like low, medium, high, or 1, 2, and 3, you can at least pull that pattern up and see exactly what the settings are doing to the image.
Okay, so this is going to fix some of this problem. I took the brightness from I think -5 to +5. And then so let's give this another little run here. Then we'll talk about what the next steps would be. So I'm basically I am kind of attacking gamma and white balance at the same time.
Yep, I like that. I like that method.
So I've got my gamma somewhat reasonable right now. So and I'm okay with this. I mean, I'm not okay. This is still like preliminary. I'm going to get this better. My average gamma is 2.35, which is not bad. And then my white balance is it's a little bit blue deficient, or a little bit too much red. My average delta E is 3.2. So I'm going to go ahead and do several things here. First, I want to get my white balance. I'm just going to choose 80% stimulus and do some measurements here. Then when I'm doing 80% stimulus, I'm going to hit the I'm going to go to the color temperature control, and I'm going to turn the gains. The gains are the RGB balance on white, and 80% is a white signal. And I'm going to turn, if you look at the CalMan software, I'm going to turn the red and the green down to match the blue, and that'll be balanced. So turning the red down, you'll see this coming down. So those are balanced. Now now the image is a little on the green side. Now as I turn the green down, you'll notice the delta E error on 80% drop down to 0, or pretty close to it anyway. You see the software is rescaling as I turn the green down. Oh, I apologize. I was adjusting. I didn't select green. I was still on red.
That's okay. Happens all the time. A question came in while we're working on this part. Do the current gen native JVC projectors have the gamma droop issue that previous gen eShift projectors like the 790 and 990 had?
I haven't noticed, but I specifically on the JVC, but every technology out there I have not seen is rock stable. Everything needs to be recalibrated and retweaked.
Yep.
At some point.
Yeah. Now, as far as fixing,
so I have 80%.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. What were you saying, Jason?
No, there was a follow-up to that question. He asks if it does have that issue, do you need to fix it before you calibrate? But I was just going to say, you know, this is the page that you'd fix it on right here. This is the workflow that you would use, and this is the page you would use. Sort
of within reason. Some projectors are better than others, and and I'm going to get to that in a little bit here. So if I was Robert, I don't know who you are, Robert, but hang in there, Robert. We're going to get to that in a little bit more. So I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do. I got my 80% down. I'm going to do 20%. And if I can't get this flat, and I'm not happy with my gamma result, the next step would be to open the JVC software and run a JVC AutoCal on it. And I'm going to spend about 5 minutes on that after this step, just to tell you, just to give you a quick overview of that. So bear with me just for half a second. So let's go ahead and continue here. Let's continue to do our white balance, and we're going to do the dark side of the white balance on about 20% stimulus. And now I'm turning these values up a little bit, which will make the dark stuff a little bit brighter. So that'll flatten out my gamma a little bit more. Okay, so my delta E of 20% now is 0.3.
Excellent.
And I'm gonna go ahead. I'm just gonna click 80 one more time and see where 80 is. 80's at 1.5. I'll push red back one click. Okay. Now go ahead. So let's go ahead and see what the entire run looks like now. And again, because of the Klein, I can keep doing this, and it's so quick. It doesn't take a lot of time to see what everything's doing.
Yep.
Okay, so my black level set correctly, and my gamma on the dark side is quite good, but as it gets brighter, the image is too bright. I mean, this isn't so bad. My gamma is 2.3. I mean, this isn't, this isn't NASA precision right now, but this is a very good performing projector. But can we get it tighter?
I think too, it looks like you might have a you got like right where about it starts to get too bright. It also goes a little green on you. You're like 313, 330, 313, 331. 40s 331 also, but that's just a really simple touch up on the grayscale, no big deal.
Yeah, so but I'm still, this is still preliminary, so I'm going to keep going here.
Sure.
So I'm working with my gamma now, and I want to get my gamma a little bit tighter. So on this projector, they have these gamma controls. So under gamma, let's see here. So we have to go to custom, and then we're going to go to custom, and then we're going to choose 2.6 now. Again, this is kind of like where I was in the Hudson River, but I couldn't get to New York City. Yeah. Now when I go to custom, now I can actually be in the Hudson River but actually drive to New York City or paddle or whatever. So now 2.6. Yeah. So now when I do that, now I have access to these controls. So with these controls, you have picture tone and a dark level, bright level. And basically, whenever time it's under the gamma adjustment, it's going to do something to the gamma setting. So if you're not quite sure what a control does, go ahead to the picture control and try turning it up 10 clicks.
Yep. Okay. Yep. I always encourage experimenting. You're not going to break it. You can always put it back to where it was.
Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and do an entire run again and see what that picture control plus 10 does. And you see.
So yeah, it made the whole grayscale too bright.
So that was the opposite of what I wanted. I wanted to make the grayscale darker to get to gamma to 2.4. So I'm going to go the opposite way. And I knew that, but I was just showing you guys.
Sure.
Maybe, huh? So it was at 0. I'm just let's just randomly pick -5 and see what that does.
The other thing I like to do too, Greg, and I think I've seen you do this before too, is if I'm tinkering with a projector or a TV I've never encountered before, I might open up like 5, 6, 7 tabs across the top of CalMan there, rename them all so I can keep track of them all, and then I can just toggle between the tabs. I don't have to remember, oh, was that the dark setting I had, or was that the picture setting I had?
Yeah, so you're right. So you can create multiple history tabs, and you can actually label them, and you can jump back and forth. Did I like this one or that one?
Right.
That's more complication than I do. But yeah, I mean, it's great flexibility if you do that, but I've just never done that.
Yeah, no worries. I'm good.
So you see the top end of my gamma now is very tight. Dark end is dark again, but as I've made my gamma darker, what I'm doing is I'm crushing my black level, which is causing that to happen. So once I've set this side, I'm going to go back and I'm going to check my black level again.
What you guys are seeing right now is very, very, very common in our world, is checking something, adjusting something, going back and checking the first thing, making an adjustment. It's a lot of teeter-totter back and forth when you're doing this kind of stuff. It's very, very common to measure something 3, 4, 5, 6 times before you're happy with it.
And calibration, as I teach, it has to be an iterative procedure. One thing affects something else, so you got to go back and you got to recheck everything. I'm just choosing my SF back pattern. Why didn't it go? Okay.
Yeah, Seth says, what did Seth say? He said, there's one reason why the AutoCal software can be helpful, because a lot of this would be automated. He's right.
Sort of. I'm going to talk about automation and the JVC software in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So we'll do that then. So the black level has gotten, it's crushing now. I bumped my black level control up to +10. That'll fix that, but again, that's going to make that darker. But we'll see how this works now with the gamma, how that's affected our gamma. So we have. I didn't select 100 first and let it sync. So it lost sync. Let's go ahead and do this.
Getting closer.
Yep. Okay, so we've seen how that, I mean, that's pretty darn not so bad, but we can go ahead and we'll do one more tweak on here, and then we're going to go to, then we'll talk about the JVC software and where we'd go if we weren't happy with this. And I'm pretty happy with this. I mean, my average delta E is 0.8 right now.
Yeah, that's excellent.
That's not so bad.
Yeah.
So we're going to go here. We're going to, under gamma now, we're going to go ahead here. We're going to take this down just like one more click maybe. Let's go one more click. And when I do that, that's gonna make my black level down a little bit further. I'm just gonna bump my black level up one click, and we're gonna let it ride and see what we got here now. You know, again, I'm not necessarily going for 100% perfection now. I'm trying to get the process down in a 2-hour webinar.
Oh, sure.
So this is looking very sweet.
That looks really good.
On the gamma results. Little bit probably dark in here. You know, I would want to put in my my brightness control, and it might take another click or so on the brightness control, which would fix that, which again might make me have to pull the picture control down another click on the gamma setting. Well, so as I pull the picture down the gamma setting, it'll fix this, and then I'll have to readjust the brightness control here, and eventually I'll get a little bit better. But I mean, I'm going for a gamma 2.4 and I'm averaging 2.396. That's pretty damn on.
One thing I want to point out too is, like, you know, don't get too obsessed over what these graphs look like, because if you look at the hard data at the bottom of the screen, level 10 is a delta error right now of 0.5, and that's where it spikes the hardest there on the dark end. So even though the two graphs aren't lining up perfectly, the delta error at that spike is still really, really, really low. So I like to look at the graphs first, and then when I'm fine tuning, I start looking at the actual numbers. But this is really good.
Yeah, and then the other thing that Jason had pointed out is I am a touch green. Green is the worst color to have, so it wouldn't hurt me to go down to right around 60 or 70% and maybe take one click out of the one or two clicks out of the green white balance.
Simple. Yep, easy.
So that is your 2-point white balance and your gamma adjustment, and I'm happy with that. Now, say your gamma line was kind of more S curvish, or it's degraded over time, and it's not the 2.6 is actually only 2.0, and there's not enough latitude on the controls anymore. So JVC has an auto calibration software. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about that right now. So I need to I'm gonna shut down CalMan, and or not shut down, just downsize it. And this is version 12 of the software. The JVC has the latest. Every JVC model from, gosh, probably 12 years now has a JVC interface software. It's so, and this is specifically for the latest firmware version of this series of Projector.
And Greg, the JVC provides that on their website, correct?
Yeah, it's a free download on the website. Just go into the service manuals and you'll find it. So I have this is it pulls out software version 12, settings screen, and first thing it asks for is the IP address. So if you have your I don't have to spend, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the setup part of it. JVC's instructions are very good. How to connect it up. This is through, I'm plugging in with an Ethernet cable directly into the back of the projector, and I'm just gonna hit the check button, and then it says connection's okay.
And Greg,
Sorry?
you have the JVC hardwired with an Ethernet cable into an access point, or are you connected directly to the laptop with an Ethernet cable?
I'm going directly to the laptop. You can do it that way too, but this is just how I do it with all my. I just go direct connect. Yep. I'm not using anybody's network. I'm not worried about other network issues.
Sure.
You know, hard line direct. I know it's not going to screw up.
Excellent.
So when you go to do the using the AutoCal software, the first thing to know is when you start it up, there's a backup calibration data. So if you happen to screw things up, or you don't like the results, or you just go ahead and you're tweaking, you're actually can pull your last saved configuration back into the projector. So that's kind of important to know. So that's what this is on the screen. The next thing is we have to type in the serial number. So I have to apologize. I did not get the serial number on the back of the unit. So I need to go ahead and do that really quick.
It's probably in the menu though, right, Greg? The serial number?
Is it in the menu?
Is it in the menu with the firmware version? I can't remember now.
I've always just gone to the back and taken a picture of it, and all the projectors I've done.
Sure. It might not be in the JVC. I might just be thinking of something else.
I don't see it. Okay.
Okay.
So just
cool.
I'll be back in 10 seconds.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I know like on a lot of flat panels you can find the serial number in the menu, but I guess not on the JVC. I think you can on some of the Sonys too. I do recall some of the Sony projectors having the serial number in the menu, but that's okay. What I'm curious about, I'll ask Greg when he comes back. I'm just curious why the software needs the serial number. I don't know if that's just part of it or
Adam?
Something like that, but
write this down for me. 11440401. You remember that? 11440401. Get it?
Gotcha.
Want me to write it down?
I got it. 11440401.
Oh, perfect. I couldn't. I lost my camera icon on my phone.
Ian, I know you're on the call. Gene had mentioned that if you put serial number, just all zeros, that works. So Ian, if you could confirm that, that'd be cool.
Well, I'm sorry, I was indisposed. What was that?
You're fine, Greg. Gene had mentioned that if you put the serial number in, it's just like all zeros, that works. Yep. So I was just checking in with Ian if that was the case here too.
Okay, I think another part of it is when it saves your configuration file, it also the serial number is part of your file name.
That's okay. That's the reason why it needs a serial number. I was wondering about that.
Okay, so I'm going to hit OK now, and boom. So now I can choose what I want to do here. Then on the older JVC projectors, you could actually go in and do gamma adjustments, and you can do the same thing here.
Mm-hmm.
So you can pull up your gamma preset, custom 1, 2, and 3, 2.6, which is what we had, and then if you wanted to pull down the dark points or pull up, you could pull up the up and down different points, and you can do a multiple point gamma adjustment this way. Right. You can also do multiple point white balance adjustments if you just choose the red, green, or blue independently. Mm-hmm. So you can do this is a 12 point at this point. So you can do a multiple gamma adjustment or white balance adjustment manually using this screen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing to show you on your JVC projector as an example. You can go ahead and you can pull in not here on your older JVC. You can actually import. You can go to the JVC website and you can grab the Rec 2020 color presets and you can you can load them in here too. All the similar for the last 5 or 6 generations, the software is pretty similar on the different models. But
Ian mentioned for reference in the future, also a great idea to keep backups of the INIT file after the first cal, just to have as a backup. It's a good point.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
So we can go to calibration here. And I'm not going to do that, but so you have a choice of the i1 Pro 2 and the Spider X. Spider X is a relatively inexpensive tri-stimulus device. i1 Pro 2 is a spectroradiometer. I have not had good experience with the i1 Pro 2 because it doesn't measure the black level well enough to give you a good or consistent result.
Yeah.
Spider X, if you follow the software, well, I don't even have it connected here, but you click on the screen, click on the meter, and then you put the meter about 10 feet, or sorry, about 10 to 24 inches from the screen, pointed at the screen, and it'll measure off the screen. Once you do that, you'll just hit the auto button, and it'll go through a series of measurements. It takes about 5 minutes, and then it'll give you a measurement device on that. And it'll do some measurements in that, and then it'll do your gamma measurements, or it'll readjust, auto calibrate the gamma for you. Now it also does the white balance too. The problem is, especially with the Spider X, is it's a very inexpensive meter, and it's not going to give you a very accurate white balance. But it does a good job at measuring the luminance values, so it'll give you a nice flat gamma response.
Right.
And then you would go back to your CalMan software, and then you would manually do the two-point white balance once all the gamma points are nice and flat.
Sure.
So you kind of use them together, and this is a nice thing to do. Now, from our calibration tonight, I wouldn't bother doing this. This is not needed. But in the case if it was, or if you couldn't get your gamma linear, or your white balance was really far off out of the bat, you could go ahead and you could auto cal with this, which would put it in a more linear state before you did the calibration manually.
Somebody had actually mentioned that before in the comments. They asked about doing some stuff before to make it easier when you go to do it manually. That makes sense. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends how much you want to get into, how much time you want into it. But I mean, I'm looking at this right here, and yeah, I'm going to tweak 10 and 20% a little bit more. I might tweak my green a little bit more, but I mean, my average delta E is 0.8.
Right.
You know, and I teach, if you're at a delta E with delta E 2000 of less than 2, you're below you're below the ability to visually perceive any color error anyway.
That's cool that you aim for 2. You know, the general rule of thumb is 3, but if you're aiming for 2, then you know it's going to be good. That's a good target to aim for.
Yeah, the only reference I've seen on that is Dr. Charles Poynton, and he's at 2 in his color.
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
Color methods and technology. I forget the textbook. Anyway, nice guy.
Seth asked, is there an auto cal through the JVC software or a workflow for CalMan that you could use better meters? I have not seen an auto cal workflow in CalMan yet for JVC.
CalMan and JVC had some auto cal partnerships maybe 5-7 years ago, but they haven't done anything recently. So you're limited to whatever JVC meters, whatever software the JVC picks. And that is currently, the last couple of years, the i1 Pro 2, and now, and it used to be the Spider 5, and for this particular model, they've gone with the Spider 10, which is the newest meter from Datacolor. So we have this is our white balance done, our gamma's done. I consider this to be if you're creating a painting, this is your canvas properly set up, and now we can look at the color on top of the canvas. So next screen again. So now we're going to look at color management color adjustments. This right now is set for 100% stimulus at 100% stimulus at 75% saturation. No, 100% saturation, 75% luminance. And that is the default preset. I'm just going to go ahead and do the measurements here. You see the white balance is on, and not so bad. I mean, and you can go ahead here and you could hit 25% sweeps, and you can do a whole bunch more measurements. So here now you can see how linear the color response is. 25, 50, 75, 100 on green. Are they all falling in the targets, or are they not falling in the targets? So I teach pretty much categorically. 10 years ago, we used to say, oh, let's just set it on on the full Rec 709 and do color management based on that. But the problem is not all these displays perform linearly. Like on the example here, 25% stimulus of the RGB values, they're all delta E's of less than 1 with the exception of red. But as it goes towards the outer edge of the color gamut, the delta E values get larger. So it's not a linear response. So instead of targeting 100%, tell my students when we practice in the class, just go ahead and select 75% as your target value spot. So you see, instead of measuring the entire outside, you're targeting somewhere towards the middle, and towards the middle is where all the content is, not on the extreme edges. So we want to get as much of the content as we can, as accurate as we can, and not worry about the edges so much. And that's because we don't have, these controls do not act linearly all the time. Does that make sense, Jason?
You got it.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do some measurements now. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. I was just answering a quick question in the question box. The question came in and said, does the delta error formula ITP have any use in SDR calibration? There seems to be some debate about that. John asked that question, and I was just responding to him. Everything I've ever seen and learned and heard about with ITP, it was really good to use if you were having some issues especially in the darkest part of the picture.
Yeah, as I understand it, I mean, I'm just reading some stuff on it too.
Sure.
We're using it for HDR, and we're using it like for spectral highlights and some comparatives and spectral highlights and tone mapping and all the other stuff related to HDR. So I'm just jumping back here and keeping my brain on track because I can't multitask. Going over here, and we're going to go now to CMS. We're in color profile 709, which is great. Which one's going to get us closest to New York City? And 709 is a preset you have. And then we can turn color management on, and then we can choose each control independently. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to choose red. And I'm just going to hit continuous readings. So here I'm going to turn down. So when you're looking at primary colors, the largest part of your delta E error is your luminance. So we're going to go ahead and choose the luminance of red, the brightness control, turn it down a couple clicks. Okay. Then we're going to turn the saturation up a couple clicks.
Now, Greg, just so everybody can kind of see what you're doing or know what you're doing. I don't see the menu up on the. There it goes.
Okay. Yeah. What happens is I'm double clicking on the menu and it was dropping to the bottom of the screen.
Oh,
so
okay.
I can just leave it here.
Excellent. No problem. I just wasn't sure if you were using another interface or but that makes sense. When you click on it, it moves down to the bottom of the screen. There you go.
So you can see as I turn the hue down, it's also affecting the saturation or the chroma. So you have some interaction back and forth. So totally. I bump the hue down a little bit. So now I'm going to have to bump the saturation up a little bit more. All right, so my delta E of 75. This is 75% stimulus at 75% of Rec 709, and I'm going to do that's red, and then I'm going to do green. I'm going to primary and then secondary colors. Green looks pretty tight already. Just take one click out of the saturation. Blue. And blue is really tight. I don't know. Let's see. So take down a saturation. That might, you see that overcorrects blue. So blue is perfect at the default. Cyan. Oh. Cyan is good. I'm going to take one click out of the hue.
Gene asked, I think you may have touched on this when I was answering the other question, but Gene asks or says, I usually use 75% saturation and 100% luminance for CMS. What are the benefits of using 75% luminance? Okay.
I would suggest never use 175. Always use 75/75. The correction is never linear. and you always want to make sure that the center part of the image is more accurate than the outside edge of the image. And I'm going to show you that in a half a second. So if you choose 75-75, you're targeting more towards the center than the edge of the image. And you're going to be more in linear operating range of the video display. Just turning down the magenta a couple more clicks, and then we're going to go to yellow. I guess is the only color we haven't done, and yellow is really tight too. I'm gonna in a second screen here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as soon as I get this set up a little bit more. Okay, so I have done my CMS adjustments. I can go. I can do the. Now I'm going to go back to the sweeps, and I'm going to show you what the correction is here and talk a little bit more about that last question. Okay, so my average delta E is 0.6 and my worst is 1.5, and I can guarantee my worst at 1.5 is going to be on the extreme edges.
Yeah.
At 100. Because what's happening here, if we can look at the colors, as you go towards the outside edge, I mean that's where we're losing it on red, and we see 75 is nice and tight, and 25 and 50 are tight. If I had tried to get 100 perfect, 75 everything else. And 25 would be further off, and right. you can see it on the left side of the screen here too. 75 is really tight. 50 and 25 is tight. 100 is off the worst. If I try to do 100 tight, 75, 50, and 25 will be off more, and that means majority of your content is going to be in this 25, 50, 75 range.
It's not worth fixing the extremes.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to choose one of these in a basic color management, color adjustment without using a 3D LUT, which is more of an advanced class that you can talk about when you're talking to Jim Peterson at Lumagen, maybe. Mm-hmm. You can only choose one set of points to get accurate. So then you want to see how does everything balance against that. And, right. and I found that 75% simulus at 75% saturation is going to be your best compromise to get 20 and 50 and 75 reasonable at the expense of getting 100 a little bit less accurate.
Just what's the lesser of two evils? And that's what you have to think about sometimes.
Now, that being said, so when we're talking about setting up a projector for DCI or Rec 2020, we can't get close to Rec 2020.
Not even.
So when we're doing DCI or Rec 2020, we're going to be choosing 50% of value to target for your CMS adjustments, and we're going to get to that in about 15 minutes, I think. Any other questions, Jason? How are we doing?
We're doing good on questions. Somebody did notice that. I think this is your custom workflow. Go back a page. Measurement. I think you had a typo there. Somebody pointed that out. Other than that, Robert actually asked, what about edge blending or stacking multiple projectors? In this, is this scenario common? What are some pitfalls for calibrating multiple units at once? I've encountered this a couple of times. I've had a couple of systems I've worked on with two projectors making a double E bright image. And typically when I run into those, I calibrate each one individually, and then I'll look at them together. And in some cases, the first one I ever did in that kind of scenario was a double stack Runco. They actually sent somebody to the customer's house to blend them because I guess that was a pretty complicated process. And then in their own software for the Runco, the projectors were like locked together, if you will. So anytime you made an adjustment in the menu, it was affecting both projectors. So in that case, somebody from Runco came out to the customer's house, blended them, and did all that work. And then I came in afterwards and did all the color correction.
I mean, it's pretty easy to do. The double stack is the issue in this double stack is alignment.
Right.
Well, once you get alignment set, this is all relatively easy.
Right.
But it's just getting the lines to match up between the two projectors.
Sure.
So okay, so we have this all. Well, that's prior screen, and then we're going to, so CMS is good now. So now we can do some posts. So we can do a post validation color checker if we want to, and there's a variety of different screens you can use, but this is the straight one on the PVA workflow. And if you're using CalMan, there's a variety of other evaluation screens you can use. But this is a combination of primary colors and skin tones together.
I really concentrate a lot on those several patches that are clustered together where the skin tones are at. Those are so important to get right.
Right. I mean, and that's So from an evolutionary standpoint, we don't have the ability to evaluate a primary color based on color memory. We're very poor at that.
Right.
But we have, from an evolutionary standpoint, we have a very good perception of skin tone error. And even if it's someone you've never seen before, you can look at them and see, are they flushed, are they hot, are they pale?
Yeah.
So we're really key on, and from an evaluation standpoint, what flesh tones are doing.
Yep.
And of course that's what we're measuring. So we have all the different flesh tone measurements here.
If you've ever dealt with like a sick kid before, they look kind of green or yellow, you know something's wrong. You know.
All the time. Yeah. So here we're going. So we have our average error is 1.3. Our worst is 3, and the worst error looks like probably the blue primary color. And again, that's because we focused on 75/75 and not 100/100. If we were to tweak our grayscale a little bit more, we could have pulled down the green a little bit, which probably would have fixed our grayscale error. And the amount of grayscale and gamma error is directly related to how much error we're going to have in the color management. Right. So if we tweaked a little bit more in the gamma and we tweaked a little bit more in the grayscale, that would have just have tightened up this that much more. And then we can go ahead and say that if we wanted to, make a report, and that is our calibration. Now, of course, it's really important to note is you can't look at the charts and say the calibration's good.
100% correct.
There are so many things that we're not, I mean, on this particular screen, oh, this looks perfect. Well, this isn't telling me peak light output. Am I still at 16-foot Lamberts? I might have to recheck the contrast or the light bulb setting. And I might want, the sharpness setting could have changed. Am I in 0% overscan? Is my keystoning turned off? Or all these other things that could be affecting image fidelity? This is only one step. So at the end of the day, you got to have your reference content. And so content that you know to be referenced, something that's not stylized or colorized, something that you know to be accurate, and you want to be going back and forth and just be looking at a variety of content to know that things look reasonable before you say you're calibrated, not just the chart. And so I have on the Murideo generators with PVA, we have a test disk, and these are some of the images off the test disk that we have. And of course, with the way my camera's set up, it doesn't show anything to you, but so I can look at some images. And anyway, so you want to look at a variety of content you're familiar with, and when you're doing this for a client, you want to be with the client and showing them what you're looking at and why you're looking at things, and how you set the black level. And why you set the black level at that particular point. And the more the client is with you, and the more understanding the client has of what you've done, the happier the client's going to be.
I agree. I usually really suggest to my own private clients, hey, if you have other stuff to do while I'm here, I get it, but at least sit with me at the beginning so we can at least look at some test patterns together at the very minimum. But a lot of people that I deal with, they sit there with me on the couch and ask a bunch of questions and stuff. And I always tell new calibrators, you're not only there to push buttons and make everything look great, but you're also there to kind of teach the customer what to look for and about room lighting and where they should be sitting. And we're there to teach the customer how to get the best picture possible. And if that means giving them a little education on how our eyes work and room lighting and stuff like that, then spend the time. It'll be totally worth it.
Totally, yeah. And and again, the more interactivity you have with the client, the happier the client's going to be.
Definitely.
And, absolutely. And again, as a calibrator, you and I have been doing this for years. We're quite comfortable with the process. If you're new doing this and you're just starting off and you've only done 1 or 2 professional jobs, you got to get a comfort level. And I always like to tell my students, go home and become a master of your display.
Yes, yes.
So, and then go from your living room and say, okay, well, I own a LG C9, or I own a JVC RS2000. Become an expert at that, and then take that expertise towards the other models that are out there and the other brands that are out there, and that is your basis point.
Good tip.
But practice, you got to practice.
I always equate this, Greg, to learning an instrument. You don't take one lesson and all of a sudden you're playing like Jimi Hendrix. You've got to practice. You got to do it over and over and over again. You got to get your hands on lots of different displays. And I talk to calibrators. Certain integrators out there only sell Sony. So they'll calibrate a million Sonys in a row, and then the first time they bump into a Samsung, they're like, "Whoa, what is this menu? What does all of this mean?" So I'm getting phone calls, but that's okay. But that's why both of us have always preached to practice.
Yeah, and I only know 3 chords, so I can't play a Sony. So when we're talking about this and JVCs, Sony, another good brand, they have a software too. Now the Sony software is not an auto calibrate software, but it's an interface system to go to a multiple grayscale and gamma adjustment. So you can do a very similar thing manually on the Sony, but you need to get the Sony software, and that's available directly from Sony. And again, that's also free. So just so you can do this. So you can do similar things on the JVCs and the Sonys.
Excellent.
Okay, so HDR now, hey?
Yep. Now the easy part.
Yeah. Okay, so well, this is a little bit of a recap of what I did 2 weeks ago with you.
Greg,
so let's just start. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Did you also do a PVA HDR workflow too, or are you just going to use a generic one that's in CalMan already?
I'm working on Tyler to do a PVA HDR workflow. So I'm just using the generic CalMan HDR workflow, which is fine. It works well. So I'm just going to jump on HDR calibration. Okay, so the first thing is I set this up for, what were we, 18-foot Lamberts for SDR?
Yeah, 18, 20, 20, something like that, yeah.
Whatever, that 16 to 20 was kind of my target area.
Sure. Yep.
HDR needs to be brighter, because we have in HDR, you have the regular content, which is what we've been having, but then they add to it what's called spectral highlights, things that are brighter than the normal content to give you this higher dynamic range. So if you're limited to 20-foot Lamberts and you maxed out an SDR, that means you only have 20-foot Lamberts to work with HDR, and that means all the regular content is going to be dimmer than SDR, which is going to look terrible. I mean, it's not going to look terrible, it's just going to look underwhelming. So if you go from an SDR movie to an HDR movie, and you think HDR, ooh, UHD, 4K, blah, 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 it's going to look underwhelming.
Yep.
So we want to have headroom for HDR. So let's go ahead and see how much headroom we actually have. So that's the very first thing we need to do. So I am opening up the HDR workflow. My meters are all set up. Everything's good to go. My targets, I'm Rec 2020 D65, ST 2084 we're going to talk about. Next screen. Okay, pre-calibration capture. Let's just go ahead and do some measure. I got to get a sync here. And then I got to turn HDR on my generator. HDR on. And if you're not sure whether your projector or device is doing HDR, all the flat panels will say, the LG will say HDR 10 or Dolby Vision in the upper right hand corner. Sony does something similar when you hit the menu button on the flat panels. On the JVC and the Epsons, you just go to the info button and you go on the info, it says right there. So I'm doing 1080p at 60, which is fine. And then I'm doing Rec 2020, and it's an HDR 10. And I'm up to 266 hours.
There you go.
Okay, so the generator's hooked on. I'm in HDR. I'm going to go ahead and hit and just do a preset run of measurements.
Started off pretty good.
Yeah, but it's there's lots of things going on here, and you were with me 2 weeks ago, so you kind of know some issues. So what this is measuring right now, it's this gamma curve, which is what we call the ETUF response.
Greg, real quick, before you go further, I don't want you to get hung up here. Ian just caught something. I must have missed it. On the generator, did you set it to 10-bit or is it still an 8?
Doesn't matter. Yeah, yes, you should be in 10-bit, but it doesn't. It functionally doesn't matter. It's going to look exactly the same. If we're going to question, let's just go to 10-bit and we'll do exactly the same thing. Of course, when I hit the 10-bit button, the projector needs to resync with the data, so that didn't work. So let's go ahead and do that again now. And again, if you notice also, I'm still in 1080p. I could switch to 4K.
Yeah, that's at least of our worries here. Michael says mastering display primary is on the 6G. Should that be set to 2020 instead of P3?
We're going to get to that in a little bit.
Excellent.
So and then the other thing we're talking about is 8-bit or 10-bit. There are, I know on the Sony unit specifically, a couple years ago, they would only go into HDR mode if it accepted a 10 bits, if it had a 10-bit signal. So if you're trying to do 8, which is a problem with on some like the Apple TV boxes, they'll based on bandwidth, they can be in 8 bits, so that you might not get into HDR mode on a 2-year-old Sony projector. So right now, so this is measuring our peak light output of at 186 nits right now, which that's a fair bit of output. But again, the specification for HDR is a theoretical 10,000 nits, and most of the mastering displays are at 1,000 nits. Now, the first thing we talk about HDR and projectors. In post-production, there is no HDR work for the home theater market mastered for projectors. Everything is done on flat panels. The Sony BVM 300 and X300 and X310 and the Dolby Vision monitors, they're both 31 inches. The Sony does 1,000 nits. The Dolby Vision monitor does 4,000 nits. So if you're doing Dolby Vision, it's mastered at 4,000 nits on a 31-inch monitor. If it's HDR10, it's mastered on a Sony at 1,000 nits. Projectors are not thought about in post-production. So we're doing something that's not really meant, that hasn't really been mastered for the way we're using it. But that being said, there's nothing we can use projectors and we can do really cool, good-looking images in HDR, but it's really not part of the spec. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Without being too confusing.
Nope. That's good.
So the specification for the ETUF and gamma response for HDR is not relative. They're absolute values. So when you're at a 50% stimulus in HDR, you should have this much light output, and that should be consistent, or in this on any technology you have out there. Well, the projectors, we don't have 1,000 nits. We're lucky to be at 100 nits sometimes. I'm very lucky based on the screen I have, which does have some side effects of having too much gain, but I have a lot of light output. I have more light output than most people have. So we're going to do some playing with this to get this looking better, to more like specification. But that's why this is off so far right now, saying it's much darker than specification because a projector can't get as bright as a flat panel. So it's never going to be on this line. So let's go to the next screen now. So I'm just going to choose white screen right now, and I'm just going to hit continuous measurements. And I want to see how much light output this projector, how much horsepower do we have to play with here. So I'm at 177 candelas. Let's see how the projector's set up now. So we're in frame adaptive. We can do frame adaptive. I'm not going to do frame adaptive right now. I'm just going to talk about frame adaptive towards the end of it. I'm going to jump to HDR.
There was a question on that too, so I'm glad you'll address it. David said, you might want to change the frame adaptive mode and select HDR10. But you're going to get to that, so that's good.
Oh yeah, I'm going to jump into HDR10. And again, when you do that, it has the resyncs. There's a start time. Lamp power low. I'm going to turn it on to high. And the aperture, I'm going to auto 2, and aperture's all the way open. So now I'm giving all the horsepower this projector can put out. And I'm going to hit measure.
Greg, will the JVC remember that you have the lamp in high just for HDR?
Yes. Okay,
cool.
Yeah. Okay, it's selected with the preset. So as you go back and forth between modes, it'll automatically do that for you.
Excellent.
So now we are shooting at 220 nits. So we have a lot of horsepower to work with. Again, that's only 1/4 of what the master monitor does, though,
right,
in post production. So, but this is still going to be a very nice image, and we're going to have a lot of headroom for HDR. So we have 220 nits. Okay, let's go ahead now and let's jump to the grayscale gamma screen. But again, I say gamma. Gamma is really, we call it E2F and HDR. So you see, I've maxed at 220. That's my maximum luminance value. And then how HDR works, the signal's clipped to this at that point, and then everything else. And then as it goes in here, this is what's called the tone mapping, where the content that would be clipped is being crushed down to actually be displayed, but it'll be displayed at the wrong luminance values. So right now, the luminance is much too low because the luminance here is expecting 1,000 nits at its peak point, and we can only give it 220 nits. So I like to use what's called a multiplier, and we talked about this a little bit in our last session. So a multiplier is I'm going to get the software to think that it's actually measuring higher values than it is. So if I want to be, and I use the value of an LG flat panel, and I say about 600 nits, and then there's going to have some tone mapping on. So if I'm trying to emulate something around 600 nits, it's just going to be dimmer. I want to use a multiplier to get this to 600 nits. So if I have 220 nits and I want to be at 600, that's probably a multiplier of 3. So every time I do a reading, I'm going to multiply this reading by 3, and then it'll better follow the theoretical curve, which is the yellow line. So the gray line is our measured line, and the theoretical is our yellow line. So in the little gearbox up here, I can go ahead and here, and I can just go under screen offset, and you see large Y, that's the luminance value. So every time it does a measurement of luminance value, I'm going to type in the number 3, and it's going to multiply it by 3. So now we see we at 220, choose 100 now. Now it's at 556. It multiplied that by 3. Okay, well, it didn't quite by 3, but that's the 3. So let's go ahead and do another full run now. So basically now it thinks it's 3 times brighter than what it actually is. So now it's going to be emulating a 600 nit display at only 1/3 the light output. Does that make sense?
It does. And the important thing here is that we're trying to get it to just track right. We're not going to get the luminance. We're just not. It's a projector. You're just trying to make it track correctly.
Exactly. Yeah. You're going to make it like scalable. It's going to look like the brighter projector, only 1/3 the light output.
Right.
So now,
real quick, Greg, Gene says, I've read that calibration should be done with the iris and manual, and I think I may have missed you talking about that. I was answering another question.
Yes, not for HDR. The iris is a necessary evil, and you can try it with or without, but it's not going to make a difference on this. But
Gotcha.
But before I eat my words, let's go ahead and try it. So thanks, Gene.
While you're doing that, Greg, what screen do you have? I know the specs on it, but what brand is it? Do you remember?
This is a Screen Research.
Screen Research. Okay, cool. Somebody had asked.
It's a dual masking. It's a 2.4 aspect ratio with side masking that comes down.
Awesome.
And it does affect, it does roll off a little bit more. It's actually, it follows E2F a little bit better, which means it's a little bit dimmer. I'm gonna use Auto 2 for HDR. So we're gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna do it one more time now. Now, if I had a choice to choose, I'd always want to have a little bit of a brighter setting anyway. But the closer I get the E2F to track the yellow line standard, the better my CMS adjustments are going to be, the more accurate my color adjustments are going to be. So I really want to get this on the line. But that being said, so now once I've set this up, and this projector is pretty sweet with the settings, I can go into the gamma preset. I can turn off auto tone mapping. And I can turn the picture control up, and that'll make my E2F brighter, or I can turn my picture tone down and make my E2F darker. So if I want a brighter or a darker image, I can just go up or down. And this is done automatically with the auto tone mapping control, which is what we're going to talk about next, or in the next few minutes anyway.
Greg, have you noticed if you use the auto iris in HDR, have you noticed any pumping or any effects like that?
Auto iris 2, no. I have noticed an auto iris 1. That's across the entire JVC line. I never say the ones to choose. So I can control, and this is different than your vintage of projector, Jason. Is these controls have enough adjustment on them to actually be useful.
I think we ran out of gas on mine.
Exactly. Yeah. On yours, you ran out of gas. So you can see you can make it much brighter. So again, that's going to change the tone mapping at the top because the image is brighter. It's going to have to tone map more or less. Okay. So again, and again, this is done automatically if you go to the auto tone mapping, or you go to the picture mode frame adaptive, which I'll talk about a little bit more. So that you can do it manually or you can do it automatically. If you want to just have a JVC really likes, they're really proud of their frame adaptive HDR.
It's very good.
For a straight HDR calibration from last year's model, you don't have the frame adapting, so you just the HDR 10. So this is how you'd set up one versus the other. So I'm just going to go back and just go ahead and just go back to HDR 10 and change the gamma on white to match the E2F. And it's rolling. It's going down a little bit before the roll off. So I'm just going to bump it up like one click or so. That's falling a little bit better. Maybe even one more click again.
David asks, Greg, just clarify real quick what part of the menu you're in and what adjustment you're making.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys.
That's okay.
I keep double clicking and it goes off the screen. There we go. So I'm in the gamma menu, and I'm adjusting the tone control. So
Excellent.
so it's going a little bit over the yellow line here, but it's getting closer to the yellow line up here.
It's almost rolling off, almost perfect. It's getting close.
Yeah. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I can also look at my white balance here, so I can choose like 60% stimulus. And I can do a little bit of a white balance here just to get the 3 lines on across from each other, not necessarily on the 0 line, but at least get them even. Right across from each other, even.
Yep.
So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to pull down blue. Oh, I'm sorry. I double clicked. I'll put it back on the screen there for you. Yeah. do an entire run again. But again, with the client, it's a pretty fast process. So I'm going to choose 50%. And right here, I'm just going to pull down blue a couple clicks here, then pull down red a couple clicks.
Once you get this close, guys, that's where I start looking at the numbers. So if you look down at the bottom at 50%, he's 313,329, bang on.
Yeah, right here.
And you can tell because the RGB balance graph that Greg's referring to, they're not necessarily at 0 because remember this is a luminance thing at this point, but getting them even is how we get that D65.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, if the gamma was perfect, these would be across from each other and on the zero part.
Yep.
Yeah. So now we're saying that is D65, but the luminance is a little bit low, which is exactly what we're seeing here.
Greg, Robert asks, what's the nit level set to on the generator for bright? I think the default's 1000.
Yeah, well, it's 1000.
Yeah.
So there we can go there. So we're okay with that. Delta E's are down. Now, as we see our Delta E's get higher, this is because we're doing tone mapping.
Right.
Because we can't get to 1000 nits. You know, we're limited to, well, theoretically, we're at 688 nits based on the multiplier of 3. So if it's at 1000 nits, we actually have an error of 5 because we can't get to be that bright.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why that. So it's relatively flat in here, but as we get into the tone mapping, it actually, you know, it gets the errors look worse. So that is our basic luminance setting now with our grayscale. Now we do go to color management. So we can look at CMS. Let's go ahead and look at a little bit of CMS adjustments. The same process as we did before. We can look at, let's do 25% sweeps. Now again, we're set for Rec 2020, and again, we can't get to Rec 2020. So let's go ahead and just see how this looks though.
The red stayed straight and the green curled off.
Yeah, because the red primary is straight, but you see, all these projectors are really set for a DCI color primaries.
Yeah.
And the DCI green is over here.
Right. Right.
So it can't go this way when that's the actual native point. So it kind of goes out here, then it kind of takes a quick right-hand turn and it stops. You know, the actual 75 and 100% on cyan are right on top of each other because it can't go out that far at all. It can't go on beyond the green line or between the green primary point. So it's stuck on this line here between blue and green. And then red's pretty linear, but as you can see, as it goes further out, it can't hit this far. So 75's off, 50's off, 25's off, and magenta is pretty similar to that. So again, this is what we're dealing with. So and we can't get out here. So if you try to select full Rec 2020, it's not going to be. You can't get it out there. So all your points are going to be off. If you did like SDR and you did 75%, well, you can't even get to 75% here on DCI. So your points aren't going to be on either. So we're going to make sure we're going to get a color point we can actually measure and actually get to be accurate. So we're going to choose 50%. Okay, and let's go ahead and get those points on. And again, the better our ETOF is and the better our white balance is, the more accurate this is going to be. So the more time we spend on the first step, the more accurate this step will be.
Greg, Calpo asks, for HDR, do you need to turn off tone mapping on the JVC?
Yes, it's turned off. It's turned off right now.
Excellent.
Yeah. We're looking at our primary secondaries. You know, our errors are 1 to 2. Not so bad, but we can get them a little bit tighter. So, that's a 25%. So let's go ahead and 50%. Yeah, I mean, so these are relatively, I mean, they're all less than 2. That's not so bad. So let's go. So again, we do the same thing as SDR. Choose a value and calibrate it. So we're going to go ahead and color profile 2020, Turn color management on. I can see here that my saturation was under. So you see, I've turned up my saturation. Look, I've dropped my delta E down to almost nothing on red. And but again, this is only one value of red. Oh, and again, you didn't see that. I'm sorry. I'm going to keep it on the. I'll keep it on the screen. Red. Let's go ahead and do green next. And be a little bit caution here. If you're cranking on one of these controls 10, 15, 20 points and it's not doing anything,
yeah, it's too much.
Think about it might be doing it to a different point.
Right.
So it might be adjusting a point that you just can't see right now.
Ladislav asks if you have the color gamut filter turned on.
Yes.
Good.
It's by default when you go to 2020. And so that is red and blue. And sorry, red. Now we're doing blue, and blue is. Want to increase the saturation of that too.
In a lot of cases, it's just a couple clicks, it drops right in.
Yeah, I mean the JVC and all the brands have gotten so much better in just a few years, and we've seen that on different technologies. You know, generation 1 of 1080p did one thing, and then generation right. 2 does it that much better, and so cyan, bump that over a click. So I'm looking at my luminance, saturation, and hue controls, and looking at my delta E at the same time. Here we go, and the only color I haven't done is magenta. Let's go ahead and do magenta, and then we'll look at sweeps, and we'll see what all the different values are doing after this.
Charles asks, I actually have had this question on JVCs in the past. There's a selection there for axis position. Does that just change the direction that control is going to go? Is that kind of how that works?
I don't know. I've had several JVC people just say, leave it alone. But let's go ahead. We're on magenta. Let's go ahead and see what it does. It is changing the saturation.
I thought maybe it would kick it into a different direction. So instead of all the reds going this way, maybe instead they only go that way. Something like that. Robert asks, do you recommend Tiger King as HDR content? Absolutely. Carol Baskins.
Yeah, frickin' Carol.
Ian says, any value to balancing errors across 2040 and 60?
Okay, so that's what I'm getting at right now. So that's cool. A good question. So I have put on 50% stimulus. Could have done 40. Could have done 60. This is 50 based on whatever, but you can choose whatever. So we can go ahead and look at some sweeps now. All right, something messed up. We're not.
It's not reading or something.
Oh, it's doing 25% sweeps.
Oh, I see what's going on.
That's it didn't. I don't know. Let me get out of here. There we go. It wasn't the pattern wasn't, the generator wasn't changing patterns for some reason.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
There we go. Okay, so I was choosing 50%. So we have one, or was I anyway? Somewhere in here. So these points are tighter on red, and of course we can't get out this far anyway, so we don't even care about that point. And again, and same thing with green. Green goes out there. Yeah. So this is kind of where you're at. Is it great? No, it's not perfect. Now this is kind of off again. So I'm thinking, what did we do wrong here? What happened here? Did I not hit the save button on the menu? Maybe save button on the. See what's going on here? I don't know. It didn't. This is not the values I had before. Oh, my luminance values dropped. I think maybe too. Hang on. What happened?
Did you fiddle with any of the saturation controls? Maybe there was some interaction there.
Well, shouldn't. Let me go ahead and just see what we're going on here. See, something jumped on me. Hang on. Maybe my finger hit on the remote control or something. HDR 10.
Ian says you might have switched on the frame adaptive HDR. Oh, never mind. He says.
Oh, it's not on. But again, this is all part of why you check and double check your work and make sure everything's saved. Oh, so you guys didn't see that. I was, let me just jump out of that screen so you can show what I was doing there. I was just rechecking my E2F. I just picture control down to click and got that reset. So you see now that I've got my luminance values correct again, my CMS adjustment's correct. So let's go ahead and hit now, stop that, and go ahead and hit some sweeps again. And you can see the 50% is on target now.
Boom, there it is.
Yeah, that's looking better.
Whoop, there it is. That's awesome.
So you can see, 25 and 50 are nice and tight. 75 it goes off, then it's way off on towards 100. And then you can see here 50. My delta E's on 50 are less than, all less than 2. 25 is pretty much all less than 2. Then as you go towards the extreme gamut, of course you have more error. Now again, you're also having more error, not only because you're going to the far points of the gamut, but you're also going to higher luminance values, and that you're in the range of tone mapping.
Yep.
So that causes more error also. And again, the accuracy of all this is based on the accuracy of this. If you have more tone mapping on and you don't get it following on the E2F, you're going to have more errors when you come to your color management. So that's that screen. You can jump down to some other evaluation screens. So this is a post-evaluation capture. Then there's some other evaluations. So again, this is it thinks it's right at 688 nits right now, which it isn't. It's only at 1/3 of that value. So based at 1/3 of the light output of what you consider to be reference, That's your grayscale tracking. This is your gamma results. And this is your and then that's your color. You can hit save report additional validation. I like to go here now. You can do straight color checker, which you'll do first, and then we can look at P3 DCI P3 versus 2020.
Robert says, and I've actually done this before myself. Is there a way to filter out the 100% range in the report so the customers, the geeky customers who might not like the graph? You remember the old Sencor CP5000 software? You could like choose what you wanted to go on the report. I've never seen that kind of functionality in CalMan.
There are certain parts to it where you can do custom sweeps and stuff.
Customize it, yeah. I'm sure you can customize it.
And you can just measure from 20 to 100 versus measuring 0 to 100 for stimulus values. But on the CMS, I don't know of that. So I mean, but part of this is, I mean, this is a very, I'd be very, look at all your CMS here. This is all freaking awesome, with the exception of, 80 and 100. These are your primary colors. Well, it just doesn't do it. And, there's nothing out there that does that.
Yeah, Greg, so just to see like how this is actually mapping in the real world, can you change your target to P3 and then just rerun this test?
Right, next step, yeah.
Right.
So I'm jumping over here then, and I'm going to jump to, not the color checker, but I'm going to do sweeps in DCI P3. So I actually see how it's going to be performing with the actual colors that we're actually working with.
And now, guys, if you notice too, now look at where the P3 100% saturated green is. It's kind of to the right of the 2020.
Yeah, so instead of being over here, it's over here now.
Which is why it curled off on the other page. Boom. It's pretty darn good.
So for the JVC projector on actual DCI P3 content, which is what everything actually is mastered on. So the mastering monitors, the Sony BVMs and the Dolby Vision, they're all using the DCI P3 color space when they're doing their authoring. So basically, even they're sending the signal to be Rec 2020 compliant, but they're only looking at the colors that fall within the DCI P3 space. So we're doing exactly what they're looking at, and based on their monitors, this is a very good performing projector. All your Delta E's are, well, we're at, maybe that's 2.2 or it's 2.5, but most of them are between 1 and 2. So that's really phenomenal performance. So I'd be really happy with this. JVC, if you want to let me keep this in my house for a while, I'd be very, very willing to assist you on that.
Greg, Elvin has a question about an external lens. Would you get more light output because some of those lenses, because of the way they work, you actually do get more use of the chip and the projector?
Right. So yeah, if you're on a light challenge system, you can put an anamorphic lens on the front, which basically generically in anamorphic lenses on 2.4 aspect ratio content, the black bars are digitally removed, and the imaging chip that's 16:9 image can be put onto the black bars. Then the lens in front of the systems reshapes the image, so it makes so it allows the black bars to have image on it to create more light output.
Yeah. So like you're wasting like a third of the chip when you have the bars. So that lens reshapes the image. So you're using the full chip. In some cases, I've seen they've claimed up to like 30% more light output in some cases.
Yeah, they like to say 20 to 30%. The number they throw around is 25%. But the other problem is you're shooting through extra glass.
Right.
So extra glass. There's extra physical aberrations in the glass, dirt, dust in the glass.
Sure.
And because you're shooting through extra light glass, there actually is a light output hit from that. So so it's kind of a trade-off. But if you're in an acoustically transparent screen, which can take away 25% of the light output to begin with, the anamorphic lens is not a bad option to increase the light output, especially if. But like in my system, the way right now, there's an anamorphic lens. It'd be kind of cool to play with, but I have so much light out here. I'd be very happy with this image in SDR or HDR.
David makes a suggestion to you, Greg. He says, just ask Chris pretty please, and you might be able to keep the projector. So there you
Who is this David we speak of?
Michael says you can put the JVC in 4096 by 2160 and get an increase in light output.
Yeah, that's pretty minimal.
Yeah.
I mean, because you're in 16 by 10 at 4K versus 3840, which is 16 by 9.
Yeah.
Might
be a little bit.
Yeah. And then there's the whole argument: are you in 1:1 pixel mode versus not 1:1 pixel mode? I'm not that big of a advocate one way or the other.
Yeah.
Like these all. So we can talk about. Let me show you all these projectors. They have alignments. They, like the old CRT convergent screens of old.
Right.
The problem is as you use these convergent screens to align the red, blue, and green panels inside the projector, you take it out of 1:1 pixel mode.
Mm-hmm.
So you potentially degrade the image or soften the image by doing that. Right. But it's the lesser of two evils. I mean, if you're looking at a white letter on this projector, and the white letter has a red edge on it, or the guy's white shirt has a red edge, that's a lot worse than having 1:1 pixel mode. So it's kind of a trade-off. So I'm an advocate of always digitally converge these projectors if it has the ability to do that. It's going to make the image crisper, more focused, more better perceived resolution. And yeah, you're taking a little bit of hit on your 1:1 pixel mapping, but overall you're going to have more benefit by making sure the image is crisp and the convergence is on.
Ladislav asks, how zoomed are you right now on that projector?
I'm at, I think I'm at 21 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's middle range. This projector is a pretty, I think I could go right around 15 to about 26. Mm-hmm. So I'm right in the middle range of that.
Gene says, I had issues with frame adaptive mode that doesn't have CMS calibration. How to calibrate the colors with frame adaptive mode on?
Okay, so let's talk about that. Sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, we haven't gotten it. So that is your basic HDR calibration. So we can go over here. So we can go into the frame adaptive. So what frame adaptive does is, first off, generically, so independent of the metadata that's on the content, it'll look at dark content and make it brighter. So because so if you're on a mastering monitor and you're looking at something in 10 nits, that's really at 10 nits, that goes up to 1,000 nits. On a projector, on this projector, that 10 nits is really going to be 1/3 that light output. So it's going to be very, very dark on a projector. Right. So what the frame adaptive HDR does is it takes dark content. If it's a lot of dark content on the screen, it makes everything brighter. And then if there's a lot of bright content on the screen, it makes everything a little bit dimmer. So it kind of moves the content based on the amount of light output on the screen to make it brighter or dimmer, to make it look more pleasing. So that's what we're doing. So on the adaptive frame rate, you can see the cinema filter is on. Now, was that on before?
Ooh, I don't remember.
Jump in here. No, I just heard that click over. Yeah, you don't on HDR10 the filter is always in. On frame adaptive you can choose it. So the filter mechanism, filter mechanism moves a green filter in the light path, and that allows for a larger color space.
Right.
So it gives you, so it takes you from more Rec 709 to closer towards Rec 2020, or in this case DCI, but it does that at a hit to the light output. So if you have a large screen that's already acoustically transparent and you only can get 24-foot Lamberts, don't put the cinema filter in place. Leave it out. Shoot more towards Rec 709 and have the high dynamic range, because that high dynamic range is more important than a little bit extra color saturation for HDR content. So there's that. So we can have HDR adaptives. You use the same settings. Go ahead, lamp on high, auto on 2. You can do the same thing. HDR levels on auto now. Color temperature 65. You can use the same settings. I would use the same settings, and I would just check to see if this matches, but it should exactly match what we did for SDR or for HDR. I think we might have been HDR for HDR. Yeah. So you can see if that's the same. If not, you can go ahead and you can make that. You can put that. You can do your white balance on custom.
Yeah. Real quick, Ian just says, just so everybody can kind of know about this, if you have the cinema filter in normal, that means it's off. Just an FYI. And Ladislav says also too about the zooming question before. I think this is just a follow-up. And I'm not familiar with this. Maybe you are, Greg. He says in the JVC menu, there's a special menu where you can choose native, automatic, and zoom. I'm not terribly familiar with that, so maybe you are.
Native, automatic, and zoom. I am not familiar with that. No.
Yeah, I know.
I know there's a reset. There's a reset setting to put it all to its middle point.
Ian says it's in the input menu.
In the service mode?
Yeah, guys, is that service mode or regular mode?
There we go. So yeah, so I want to be in the cinema setting. You want to be on wide, which means the filter's in place.
Yeah. Okay, so Ian, David, Ladislav all said that this zoom menu, it's in the regular menu, it's the second tab.
For the zoom, this is second menu.
Yeah, you're in the second tab right there. Maybe the third tab, Ian says.
Install lens control. Focus lens, shift, image pattern, lens centering.
Aspect. Did you see an aspect menu?
Screen adjust, no. Anamorphic mask, mask off, pixel adjust, pixel adjustment, no.
What about the very bottom there under keystone? I might not be reading that
aspect
really well.
Native, yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Native auto or zoom, yeah.
There it is. Okay, cool.
Cool, okay, so.
Everybody's like, no, one more, no, one down, no, one over.
Will someone come over here and take this remote from me? Excellent. So again, if you're on frame adapter, you can go there. You would do the HDR10 color temperature. If it needed to be tweaked, you'd go ahead and do a custom correction factor, or not a custom color temp. And you can go ahead and do a second white balance if you needed to.
Mm-hmm.
And again, motion control. I want to turn all this stuff off.
Michael has a kind of a request, I guess. He says if you put the aspect in zoom, and then I'm guessing set the generator to 4096 by 2160, you might get a different measurement. Maybe in line output, I think is what he's referring to.
Yeah, you probably would by that.
Yeah.
Few percent.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, you were going to 16 by 9 to from 16 by 10 to 16 by 9.
Right. So you'll gain a little bit probably. That's cool. I wonder if that's in my RS600. Maybe I could play with that myself.
No, because that's not native 4K.
Oh, that's right. It's not native. It's E-shift. Yep. You're right. You're right.
There's all these cool things, and in high res it has. I think this is a little bit high, so I always go 1, 0, and 0. Whoop, you can't see that from where you're at. Just high res enhance 1, and I turn smoothing and noise reduction off.
Right.
Boom. And then again, before you say you're done, you want to go to you want to put some images on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So the Murideo is kind of nice. It's got some built-in. It's got a couple built-in patterns. I like to have the Indian market lady.
Yeah, that's a great image. Good skin tones, great, nice saturated colors, good shadow detail. It's an excellent, excellent reference image.
Here we go. Oh, so you can see. I'm sorry, it's a little Logitech camera that's on the screen, so you don't really get the benefit of what I'm looking at. But
this is kind of the best and worst part of it, Greg, is we do all this work, and then you're the only one who can actually see the the final product. But we get it. I mean, we've all been there before, looking at the befores and the afters.
Yeah, let's post this on the screen. Well, who did a better calibration? Let's post this picture on.
Yeah, I know.
We can compare it on AVS.
Yeah, yep. I've seen that too much. It's funny.
Awesome. So we're kind of wrapping up here, I think.
Yeah.
We've done a full calibration. What other questions do we have from the guys?
Seth says it looks good from his house, so that's good.
Hey, Seth, thank you. I owe you $10.
Yeah. Michael says, "Where's this picture from? Is it available?" Yes, Michael. That picture comes stock on the Murideo 6G generator if it's a Gen 2. And then I also believe that image is either from the DVS disc, Ryan's disc, or it might be from the Spears disc. Do you remember, Greg?
I don't know which disc it's from.
It's one of the two. It might be, I think actually my gut's telling me it's Ryan's disc, the Diversified Video Solutions disc.
Yeah. Now, the SDR patterns we have on the Murideo,
right?
If people want them, they can email me, and I have specific patterns that the PVA have developed with Ryan. So we have a specific we have a black level pattern for SDR that goes from 0 to 255 in 10-bit. So, you know, the other pattern that's out there only goes down to step 8 or so. So if you're trying to check, it's a little bit more tweaking for black level, white level. But PVA has some patterns. If you want to have those, you can email me. I'll send you a link to a free download. If anybody wants to get Ryan's disc for the DVS for HDR10, and you can do digital copies of the Dolby Vision and HLG, you can email me and I can give you a 20% discount code.
Cool. There you go.
Want to get those, just some other tweaking things. The Murideo G7 is really cool. You want to talk about that, because that's kind of that's what people that needs to be in everybody's gadget bag.
Yeah, the 7G it's just a monster of a generator. We've got some excellent plans for it. The generator as it sits, you know, brand new out of the box, is an HDMI 2.0 generator. But what we're doing is, if you buy it now and it's got HDMI 2.0. When we have the HDMI 2.1 hardware available, which should be hopefully late summer, early fall is what we're aiming for, you'll send that generator back to Sioux Falls, to home base for Murideo, and we will do the hardware upgrade for you, and you've got an HDMI 2.1 generator. But there's tons of test patterns in it from Spears and Munsell, from Ryan Masiola's disc, the ISF patterns, your PVA patterns. There's some patterns in here from Sony. And there's like an extra 500 gigs in here. We leave you guys to upload any kind of video clips you want, or any kind of test patterns you want. We do have some built-in test images or test videos, which are really cool if you want to test 120 frames per second. It is only 1080p, but if you're looking for high frame rate, it can do quite a bit. It's a really, really nice piece. Question came in from David and says, can that 90% discount also work on the 7G? No, unfortunately, it cannot. But good question. David says, can you just do a quick saturation sweep with the frame adaptive on to see if there's a difference?
Yeah, I can't. Well, yeah, I can.
Maybe just open up another tab or something, just so we can see if there's a.
But yeah, okay. Let's go ahead and see if I can link the question I have. The question I have is, I don't know what that's done to the grayscale or anything else.
Oh, sure. First. I think he's just curious.
Well, let's go ahead and do a quick sweep here. Yeah. So I just need to click on a pattern to resync my generator, and we want it to be on frame adaptive. Okay, make sure we're on that then. So we're on frame adaptive. HDR is auto. Color temperature is HDR10, is what we had, and then frame by frame. Okay.
And while you're doing that, John said he may have missed one of your answers to one of the questions because he was dealing with his screaming daughter. Totally understandable. But he says that question, I believe, was on CMS with the frame by frame adaptive frame rate. Were you able to calibrate the CMS with the frame adaptive turned on?
We did not do that. Let me just go here. So this is looking very different again, but it
is. It really is. Everything shifted.
But the thing, what's happening here is our ETUF is not the same, and because the ETFS our E2H is not the same, nothing else is going to be the same. So I'm just going to jump over to ETUF here. You see, it's making it much brighter.
Oh yeah, wow.
which is, again, that's affecting everything else.
Yeah.
But I think if you went from auto, let's see, auto, and then you can go auto, low, medium, or high. So what this is doing is this is on low. Let's see here. Low. It's one or the other. So basically, what it does is it's jumped on. That's high. Well, basically, the base calibration was a medium, and it's pushing it to high, and then it's pushing it to low. So it's jumped one of these, which is pushing everything else off.
Ian says, this actually answers like 3 people's questions, I think. Ian says you can cal CMS for frame adaptive through the AutoCal software. You create a dummy user picture mode with the same lamp, aperture, filter settings, etc. So it sounds like it's something you can do with the JVC software.
Cool.
Yeah. Learn something new every day, right?
It doesn't. The things that are out there don't ever stop to amaze me. Right back from 1999 when people figured out how to hook your laptop into a Mitsubishi CRT projector and fix the color decoder red push issues.
It's all downhill from there.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been working in the industry for 20 years and calibrating now for 13 or 14. And I'll tell you what, man, like I learned new stuff every single day. And if you're not learning new stuff every single day, I don't think you're trying to, because there's, as you said, there's so much information out there. There's so many different manufacturers doing so many different things. One of the reasons I love this job and I love this industry so much is because it keeps me sharp, it keeps me fresh, and I'm always learning something new. Very cool. David says, yeah, the good old days. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, guys, we're just a little over our 2 hours, so thanks a lot for hanging out and geeking out with us this whole time. We'll give it a couple more minutes in case any other last minute questions come in that either Greg and I can answer for you. A couple of you have reached out for some more information on some of the Murideo products, so I'll definitely get with everybody on some of that stuff. Everybody's saying thank you and stuff like that, guys. So I think unless there's any other last questions, Greg, thank you so much for your time and all your knowledge and experience. And any final words, any final thoughts for the viewers?
Have fun doing this. You got to practice it, and the more you practice, the better you're going to get at it, and enjoy it. I had someone tell me at one time, guys, it's only television. No one's dying today.
Yeah.
So as long as no one dies, it's only television. Just enjoy doing it and making better images.
Right. And I can tell you guys, just from experience and knowing a lot of different calibrators throughout the world now, any little tips and tricks that we can share with each other, I'm all about the community and stuff like that. And if you guys are on Facebook, we do have a CalMan users group on Facebook. If you guys are primarily CalMan users and have some tips or tricks or questions even, Tyler and I watch that Facebook page. We mod it pretty closely. So if you guys are on Facebook, search for that. It will ask you a couple questions just to make sure you're not a bot. And then Tyler and I can go ahead and confirm you into the group, and then we can all share all this tribal knowledge and any tips and tricks that we've learned all these years. So a good guy. Again, guys, thank you so much. It doesn't look like there's any new questions. So with that being said, again, this webinar was recorded. We'll go ahead and get it up on YouTube in the next couple of days so you can pass it around your friends and colleagues and whatnot. Greg, again, thank you so much for your time and have a great evening, okay?
Welcome. Take care, guys. It's been fun.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.